ahead and get started this morning. We may have some more joining us. It's always interesting to try to figure out parking in downtown. So we know that always takes us a little bit longer than we anticipate. But today is going to be all about learning loss, and it's going to be all about NWEA. And some of you I know really well, and I know that you know my story. Some of you may not, and so I just want to kind of let you know why I'm doing this training. I do not work for NWEA. Okay, I work right here at APSRC, which we are the Arkansas Public School Resource Center. And I'm one of two co-directors in the Teaching and Learning Department. The reason I do this training or anything with NWEA is because I used it as a practitioner, not because I worked for them, okay? This is my 25th year in education. I spent 16 years as a high school math teacher, and then I became an administrator in the same high school where I had been a teacher. We brought NWEA to our high school years ago. And so I used it as a leader in the building on how to do data analysis and how to use the information. After 19 years in a high school, I decided I needed to learn elementary school. And I will tell you, they are very different. They're very, very different. Learned a lot of things that made me a better person. I definitely say that made me absolutely a better person. You need littles in your life. I firmly believe that, especially after 19 years of teenagers. So in the elementary school, it was in the same district. So we also had NWEA, and I had the opportunity to take teachers through the data analysis in that situation too. I'm going to be very transparent and very honest with you. It is a work in progress. It's one of those things that you try something, but you go, I'm going to adjust that. I'm going to monitor that. I'm going to make that a little bit different. But what I did do was in the summertime, I planned out data analysis around NWEA. My teachers had the opportunity to have common prep time. So we had weekly team meetings back long ago. And so I knew it was every Wednesday all year long. So I would map it out on my calendar. As soon as NWEA for fall closed, we were going to automatically have protected time to do data analysis. So it was a structured system. And I'm going to give you that before the end of the day, how to do that through the year data analysis. But we're going to start by focusing on the need right now, because this is kind of urgent, right? We need to think about learning loss and how we identify the students with learning loss. So all of you probably have different structures in place right now to address learning loss. Some of you may be talking about extended school year, which is also known as summer school, right? Some of you may be talking about how we're going to address this as soon as we come back. We all know we're not going to catch everybody in summer school, right? So maybe we need plans for how are we going to start the school year right off the bat. We need to have those kids identified so we know what to do on day one. We need to have them identified, and we need to have a plan. So that's what today is about. Today is about showing you a process that you and either your peers or your faculty and staff, whatever it looks like for you in the role that you were in, how you all can go in and look at these reports together. And we're going to first of all learn how to identify the students. And then we're going to learn how to go in and learn what we can do for a targeted piece of information. Okay. So we're going to start with this. Now my PowerPoint's not wanting to move. There it goes. We're going to start with a certain report, and the class breakdown is not a new report. I used to use this report. It is set by default to give you a class breakdown by RIT. And we're going to talk RITs here in just a minute. But it's the default setting is to give you the class breakdown report by RIT. I used to have teachers change it. Remember, I told you this is one of those things that we change as we go and as we learn more. I used to have teachers change it and do it by goal so that it was like homogeneously grouped students in certain areas. They were already grouped for you. There's a new feature to the class breakdown report that I absolutely love, and it's called by projected proficiency. So what NWEA has done, and I'm going to give you I'm going to give you the document and the research, but what NWEA has done is that they will project, based on how a student performs on the NWEA map, how they would score on the ACT Aspire. That's the projected proficiency. So they're going to give you a projected proficiency for 3rd grade up. They don't give you projected proficiency for K2, right? It's not ACT Aspire, it's not a summative assessment for K2. Now, I'm going to be very honest with you here too. When I was an administrator in the elementary school, K2 was not a high stakes test. So when we administered NWEA to K2, it was the same setting as it was for 3rd through 8th, right? Now we know that NWEA, if you're using it for K2, it is your high stakes assessment, and I understand that. It's still all the same reports. So you still get all the same information. You still get all the same opportunities to guide the instruction. So K2, you don't get the projected proficiency. If anybody in here that's only K2? Okay. K2 will still have to do it by writ. So I have a couple of solutions for K2 for you to handle the projected proficiency piece. I have two suggestions for you there. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to get in, you're going to all dig into your own data. So if you will, log into teach.mapnwea.org. And I haven't looked at my participant list to see how many are out there in Zoom land. If you will communicate with us through chat, Sherry is going to monitor the chat. She's here with us in the room, in the back of the room, and we'll make sure we get your questions answered as well. But we're going to go to teach.mapnwea.org. Let me tell you a couple of things that I learned from experience. You know how we sometimes we have technology issues, and somebody may say in the middle of your team meeting, I cannot get in, and I'm telling you, I'm typing the address in right. Something that's very, very easy to overlook, just a little tiny tip of the trade. Sometimes they put a dot in between MAP and NWEA, and when you go look over their shoulder, it's real easy to miss that that's there. You might go, oh yeah, you do have it typed in right. I don't know why you're not getting there. So know where the dots go. It's teach.mapnwea.org. And by the way, our Wi-Fi is APSRC2. And you can see the password is resource84, and that's a 0 for the O. Okay. Oh, you can't. I'm sorry. APSRC2 is the Wi-Fi. If you choose that one, yeah, I think there's one back there. It's a all lowercase resource, but 0 for the O and 84 at the end. And if you will go ahead and log in, I want everybody to get here to this screen, and Sherry, if you'll kind of get to this screen, and we'll move forward to that report. And if you're having any trouble, please just let me know. Are we good? Okay. Does everybody, by the way, have a partner from your school with you? No. A couple of you don't, but okay, you have some people we'll be able to, we're going to do some talking and some thinking, and so we'll probably put you two together right here, and then two, and then it looks like everybody over here kind of came together in pairs. Okay, so when you get to this screen here, you always want to click on, and I always refer to this, I'm trying really hard to stay in front of this computer for Zoom. I always want to refer to this screen as the screen with the blue banner, okay, because you have to name it something. This tab should stay open, and you're going to be directing other teachers to go back. Let's go back to the screen with the blue banner. And so that I've just learned that to be a little bit helpful. If you notice right here, you should see view reports. And when you click there, a drop down is going to open up, and you should get the option to choose map growth reports. Your options and my options may look different. I'm using a national demo account for my screenshots. Now, one of the greatest additions that they did, in my opinion, from my previous work, is added the thumbnail pictures of the reports. Y'all, without the thumbnail pictures, we'd have to go in, put in all that stuff. We'd pull up the report. You might wait forever for the report to, and then you go, oh, not it. We'd go back to the other one. So this thumbnail picture over here is lifesaver. So we want to go to the class breakdown by RIT, goal, or projected proficiency. So if you see this thumbnail right here, we're going to choose this report. It's underneath the one with all the green on it. And when you get there, everybody has given their spring assessment. So you want it to be the spring roster and the spring tested 2021. If you're a classroom teacher, the rest of it should probably already be populated for you. You might have to pick your class. If you're an administrator, you will have to pick a teacher. So if we can all pick a 3rd grade and up for now, and then I'll show you the K2. But this you have to change down here at the very bottom. By default, it's automatically going to say by RIT. We're going to pick by projected proficiency. Now, while you guys are doing that, I want to tell you, my demo data is national demo data. So the projected proficiency in my demo is not tied directly to ACT Aspire, because you guys know we're one of the only states using that. So every state's using something different, and so they look different. So I have this generic report. So I called a friend that's a teacher, and I said, hey, I need you to run this report so that I can see the ACT Aspire columns and what it looks like. So she protected the identity of her students. As you can see here, all the kids have been whited out, and she sent me this picture so that I could look at it. I hope that you notice when you run that report that the headings of each column look like what? In need of support is from what? ACT Aspire. Close. Ready. This particular teacher doesn't have an exceeding column. Why do they not have an exceeding column? Nobody was projected to be exceeding, so they just didn't even put the column there, okay? My assumption is, especially this year, some of your classes may be a little bit heavy on this end, right? So we're identifying students with learning loss. If we want to identify, and if this is based on their performance on the spring assessment, which just happened, and they're predicted to be in need of support on the ACT Aspire, which by the way, you won't get until August, we can right now at least start by identifying these kids right here. There we go, we can identify them. Now, this may be something you want to think about too, as well, the close column. Do you want to go ahead and include all of the close? Do you want to look at the RIT scores in the parentheses? And again, we're going to talk about RITs here in just a minute. Do you want to look at the RIT scores and make a decision and go, you know what, I'm only going for 214 and less. So if they're above a 214 in the close column, they're probably right there at the ready level. It's not really learning loss. You with me? So, I mean, that's up to you. That's a local decision if you want to include everybody in this column, or if you want to make some local decisions on where you want to call it. Here's another example of another Arkansas teacher also protected the identity of her students. And you can see she does have the exceeding column because she did have one student that was predicted to score exceeding. Either way, both of those are, they're heavier over here on this end in need of support and close. Okay, so I want to give you a minute right now because this is very important. I want you to make sure that you know how to go in and get this report so you can help others go in and identify who these kids are, and also kind of talk about a plan based on your school model. Are you doing extended year? Would these be students that you want to identify for summer school? Would these be students that you want to identify for RTI on day one when you start school back in the fall? Kind of have those conversations. And if I'm going to go ahead and have you two up here in the front, if you two will talk to each other, and then everybody two at a table, if you'll just kind of bounce ideas, but make sure you know how to go in and identify them first, and then we'll go to K2. Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of time to talk that out. You might even want to pull up other reports. We just went into a certain report, so if you want to get set up, and I'll catch you up on that. So pretty easy to identify the students. The harder part is coming up with the system and the structure within your building to identify all the students in your building, right? So some of the conversations that I've heard this month have been, I need every teacher to pull this report. And then I'm going to create a Google Doc. And these are usually the building leaders that are like, I'm going to create a Google Doc and everybody's going to go in and they're going to list their students. So these are some things that I have heard that they're going to ask teachers to do right now so that they have them identified right now. Whether you're doing summer school or not, it gives you the information for the school year to start. It also gives you the information to be able to compare those projected proficiencies to their actual performance on the ACT Aspire when you get your ACT Aspire data in August, right? Any other thoughts that have kind of come out of those conversations? Anybody? Just think about it as a classroom teacher. It's helpful information as a classroom teacher right now, but we have how many more days of school left? So the classroom teacher, this is like that summative information, right? We need to know, we need to be planning for what's coming up, but your classroom teachers have the information. We need to get it. We need to get it and pull it and have that information. Now, on the district side, I've gone in and I've played with some reports. If you go into some of the district reports, you're going to get numbers, but not necessarily individuals. So that's where that plan and that thinking on how are we going to get everybody to pull these. Do we just want everybody to print their reports and put them in a binder? And maybe that be some of the summer work that we do, trying to identify and which kids are we going to put in what intervention group when the school year starts? What is that going to look like? But obviously identifying students is our starting point. That's where we have to start. This is all you need. Class breakdown by projected proficiency to identify them. Now, I want to show you a K2 solution. So K2 looks a little different. Remember, I told you they are not going to have by projected proficiency. So if you run a K2 report and you click by projected proficiency, because it's still an option, you're going to get a blank report. Okay, so if you go in and you're sharing this with teachers and they're like, I don't have any data, it's because it's probably a K2 class and they've chosen by projected proficiency. It will be empty, but it will still run. So you want to make sure you do this one by RIT. And so here's something I want to talk about. What we want to know is, which ones are we going to identify for learning loss? Well, chances are I'm going to use my lowest RIT band. Notice that this RIT band is a 141 to 150. I'm going to identify these 4 students for learning loss. Chances are. Now we need more information because here's what I'm going to tell you. This is a 2nd grade class. We need to know what a 141 to 150 means. What does that mean? But chances are it's the lowest RIT band in this class. These are the students that are probably going to have the learning loss. These may also, and it may come down that your 3rd band here are going to also have learning loss. So I want to talk about RITs for just a minute, because I think there's sometimes some confusion on RIT, on the RIT score, and sometimes we think of it as a grade level. It's not a grade level. So here's what I want us to do. And I want you all to do this with me so that you can take other people through this. If you've ever had, you guys know what the RIT charts, you know what I'm talking about, the RIT charts where they have math, reading, language usage, and everybody refers back to their RIT charts. Well, I printed those off in color and laminated them and I handed them out to my teachers, and one would come up missing. Y'all know that panic that sets in when you can't find your RIT charts and you go, where's my RIT chart? Where's my RIT chart? I don't know what this RIT means. And then you go to the platform and you can't find it in the platform. I actually did this in a training with teachers so that they would know, don't panic, just Google it. It's out there for everybody. Ready? So we're going to Google it. NWEA, normative data. Oops, except I can't hit my keys right. And I'm going to go ahead and add 2020 because I know it was just updated. Now, In everybody's defense that has ever Googled it and said, I can't find it, it doesn't look like it's going to be the right link. So this makes sense. Because if you notice, this is a PDF document, this very first one. This is where the RIT charts are, but it looks like a magazine article when you open it. So when you open this, you're going to go, well, that's not my RIT charts. But it is on page 3. So if I were you, I would, and I had teachers do this, star this as a favorite. So now it's bookmarked. You can always come back to it because this is great information for us. So here's what I want to tell you though. RIT data is based on normative data. And normative data means what they did is every year, that year, I think it was 2018, every kid that took the test, they put them in little categories. So every kindergartner that took the fall test, all their scores went to the same place. Those scores were lined up from the lowest to the highest, and they did all the statistics on averages. Do you remember in math when you were in school and you learned mean, median, and mode, and then you learned they were all averages? They were all different ways to average. So they did all these different averages, and the numbers are so large, like the number of numbers that they had are so large that all those averages are about the same number. They're pretty much the exact same number. So 50th percentile is an average, correct? That 136.65 right here in the fall of kindergarten, that means that's the average of how kindergartners scored in the fall. NWEA is not saying that a 136.65 is beginning of the year kindergarten level. They're telling you that's how kids did. And if you remember the old data, which is when I was in the building and I had that number in particular memorized in my elementary school because everything was based on 141. Like if we're not at a 141, we're not at the beginning of the year kindergarten, right? Performing like a beginning of the year kindergartner. And so that was 141. So they're not saying that that is grade level. They're saying that's the average of how fall kindergartners performed. So think about that. That number represents 50th percentile, which is just average. And I try not to use the word just because I'm perfectly fine with average. I want y'all to know that. But think about it this way. That number is just average. Is the ACT Aspire just average? Probably a little bit more rigorous than that, right? And that's just how kids performed. Now, something that I always like to point out to teachers is kids proved that there is this thing called a summer slide. They proved it because this is how kids performed. So take, for example, look at the end of year 3rd grade. The average of a performance of an end of year 3rd grader was a 197. Look at what the average of the beginning of the year 4th grade is. 196. That's just what kids did, which means there probably really is that summer slide that we know happens at the end of a year to the beginning of the next. So we want to remember that this is normative data, and RIT stands for Ready for Instruction Today. It gives you information about what children are ready for right now. So ready for is what we're going to always try to refer back to. So that first RIT band in my kindergarten chart was 141 to 150. This is a 2nd grade classroom, remember that. If I go back over here to my RIT chart, we want to look at the reading band, 141 to 150. It means that they are performing like 50th percentile in kindergarten. Is that indicative of learning loss? For a 2nd grade classroom? Yes. So yes, I want to include these kids in my learning loss identification. Does that make sense? If I go to this RIT band, it's 151 to 160. So I'm going to go back to my RIT chart and I'm going to look to see about 151 to 160. They're performing like the average from end of year kindergarten, not quite to mid-year 1st grade. Is that learning loss for a 2nd grade classroom? Yes. So are you with me on how you can determine if those RIT bands are going to actually So you may want to even go to the next one and go, okay, what about 161 to 170? What does that mean? What does that look like? Are those students I need to identify for learning loss? Now, keep in mind, I have teachers always keep their RIT scores with those students. Their average RIT score might not be within that RIT band. Okay, it might not be, or it might be really high in that RIT band. And so you want to be able to group students alike in any way that you can. Does that make sense on how you can use those RIT charts? Because we're going to come back to the RIT charts multiple times. Yes.
So would you be grouping children differently that are children who have learning loss versus children who maybe were always behind and moving at a faster rate, but for whatever reason, their risk scores?
No, I would not group them. I would group them based on their need, which is where we're going to go next. And then I would provide that intervention, and those students that are going to move on faster, they're going to come out of that intervention sooner, right? And we're going to move them out because we're going to progress monitor, and they're going to go to the next thing. Where these may take an extra week, right? We know interventions should be about at least a 2-week period in that intervention, right? But you may have some that are going to pick it up really fast and they're ready to go. Let's move them out. We don't want to waste their time either. So we're going to move them on. But I'm going to group them based on like need, which is where we're going to go next. If everybody feels pretty good about identifying those students, we have to first of all identify them. Do you think your school has a plan? And I'll catch you up in our next little thing on how to actually go through and identify those. If you're the building leader, thinking about what you might do right now. What do you think? One place, class breakdown, because here's where we're going to go next. And this is an area that a lot of people avoid, and I get it. I completely understand. That's not what I want. Where's my? Well, let me just jump to it. I don't know why it didn't give me my. There it is. Okay, so we did the RIT charts. Oh, before that, I need to give you this before I go on to the other thing. I need to give you this linking study because you are going to probably be faced. Anytime you start talking about projected proficiency, you're going to have people that are going to question and ask you, but how? How does this work? Because one's an adaptive assessment. By the way, you guys know that NWEA is adaptive. And one is a mastery assessment, which means there's a set number of questions and we're checking to see if you mastered this content. That's the ACT Aspire. NWEA does not operate that way, right? NWEA MAP is an adaptive assessment. Anybody have a student or two that probably wants to take 3 or 4 hours to make 100 on the NWEA? Anybody ever seen that happen? Okay, those are children that think they have to make 100 on every test they ever take, right? They need to understand that it's not possible on NWEA. It's an adaptive assessment. That's not how it was created. Where the ACT Aspire has a set number of questions you're going to get to the end, and you're going to be able to show how well you did. NWEA doesn't get to an end. We don't end. So we need to make sure we explain to students what this test is doing. So you're going to know your kids. You're going to know how much to explain to which ones, but let me tell you how it's going to work. They're going to give you, 5 to 7 questions in this area. Let's say a student gets 3 out of the 5 to 7 questions correct. So they have some understanding, but not enough to be able to answer all the questions right? So the assessment may go, you know what, let's back up to this topic and let's ask 5 to 7 questions right here and see if we can get all of these. Let's say they get 6 of the 7 questions correct. How do you feel about this topic? We feel pretty good. So guess what they're going to tell you the student is ready to do? The student is ready to start here, where they only got 3 out of the 5 to 7. Does that make sense? So that's how this test is going to operate. If you get them all, it's going to jump up. It's going to go to the next little, and they may not be in a bunch. They may not be in a bundle. They may be all sorted out. But that's what the system is doing. It's keeping track of which questions they're able to answer correctly and which ones they are not, and how they are grouping them and moving them through the adaptive assessment. So you may have somebody that's going to ask, How in the world can you do a projected proficiency from an adaptive assessment to a mastery assessment? And I'm going to give you the information. There is a link in this PowerPoint. This PowerPoint will be on our website soon, and I will show you how to get to it. But I'm going to show you how to get to the linking study anyway. We can all get there. So let's all open another tab. And we are going to Google NWEA linking study. And I want you to star this one because I want you to have this. It's a 26-page document, but you need 2 of the pages. Even if you don't want to read all the research and how they did it and how they put these tests together, you need 2 of the pages for your data analysis through the year. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this linking study archives. We have a lot of clicks we have to do to get to it. So I'm going to walk you through the clicks, and then I'm going to tell you bookmark it right here. Okay, so we're going to choose this linking studies archive. And what you'll see is when you look down here, you see all these states going down the side. That's the linking study for every state's summative assessment. I don't know why those are not in alphabetical order. I get asked that everywhere, every time I show this. I don't know why they're not in alphabetical order, but you can do it quickly over here. Do you see this related location on the left-hand side? If you will click related location and choose Arkansas, it basically just drops down to that section of that piece of the page there. So there's Arkansas's map growth linking study report, and I'm going to click on it. But now it's going to take me to another page where I have to click on it again. So I'm going to go, okay, because that just basically chose Arkansas. And now I want to choose the linking study report. And this is what you want to bookmark. Which one? Where are you, Tina? Back here? Everybody get it? Anybody else have a question? Yeah, you. And when you get to this, if you will bookmark it, this is the study. And this tells you how they did this linking study. You want to go to page 15 and 16. I have done a lot of work off of page 15 and 16 because I'll show you why. Let me scroll down here over here. Page 15. There it is. Let me show you what is on this page. They have it for every assessment the kids take. You can determine which students are predicted to score in need of support immediately after the fall assessment. See how you can use this information through the year? So here's what we have. I want to show you what we have up here. I'm trying not to walk away from the camera, sorry. The top section, those are all the cut scores from ACT Aspire by grade level for each one of the readiness levels. So in need of support for 3rd grade were students that scored between 400 and 410. Do you see that? See how that works? We could even jump down and say close for 10th graders, 422 to a 427. Those are the cut scores from ACT Aspire. Then if you go down below that top section where it says map growth reading, you see this is the fall assessment. It's going to give you a RIT band and say students in the 3rd grade that get a RIT score between 100 and 181 are going to fall in the in need of support column. Now, if you remember those RIT scores that we just went over for kindergarten, that's probably spot on, right? 3rd grade, if we're still 100 to a 181, we probably are in need of support. We have this information right after the fall assessment. Here's the other thing I like, and I actually like it better than the RIT scores. I would focus on percentiles if it were me, because this is solution number 2 for K2. And I'm going to give you a little story. I was in a co-op doing this particular training a few weeks back, and a teacher came up to me, a 1st grade teacher, she's K2, and she says, my school says I'm not doing very well because I only have 7 kids that scored 67th percentile and higher. Now, I instantly knew where 67 percentile came from. She had no idea. All she knew was she had a benchmark of 67th percentile. Above is good, below is bad. That's all she knew. But look, this is what I would do with my K2 teachers. I would have my K2 teachers come together and have a collaborative conversation right here and go, hey, how could we use this to make some local decisions on what a percentile might be for readiness for kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, which is what her school did, right? I heard it. See what her school did? Her students had to be in the 67th percentile or higher was good. Are you with me? So the school made a decision and said, we're going to go ahead and call it at 67th percentile. Think about that. We started this whole thing out talking about normative data. Those numbers in the chart represent 50th percentile. Look at what NWEA considers a readiness percentile for third grade. 67th percentile. So if all we're ever using are those RIT scores and what they're ready for or what they're performing like, that's not quite getting us to readiness. Do you see that? So her school made the executive decision. I think that I would pull all my kindergarten teachers in here and go, hey, look at this chart. What do we think we're going to call in need of support? How are we going to identify those students? You might stick with the third grade percentiles. You might make it consistent with the third grade. You might look down here and go, you know what? I'm going to call it 1 to the 40th. 1 to the 40th percentile. It's up to you. It's a local decision, but it gives you some information so that you can start making some decisions to identify students in like categories. Does that make sense? I would do it after every assessment. Because if we identify the in need of support after the fall, and then we know that we focus on those kids, we give the winter assessment, we come back to this linking study, and now we're going to use this chart. And we're going to look to see, did any of those kids that we identified after the fall that were in need of support, did they move to close? Like, are they now projected to score close? So that's a comparison thing we can do there. I'm going to show you a graphic organizer that I made for a school when I do a lot of the through the year data training. I'll go in and do the training with the teachers. And this was a chart that I made for a particular school district. And we went in, I think it was a spring assessment. I'll have to go back and look. I think it was a spring assessment. And I just pulled just this piece of the chart out. And we just looked at the numbers for the spring assessment. No, winter. It was winter assessment. We just looked at those numbers for the winter assessment and we identified those kids and what they were predicted to score in December. So something to think about. Now that's page 15 is reading, page 16 is math. So you can do the same thing for math. And y'all check this out. This was shocking to me. I don't know why. I was a high school math teacher for 16 years. I think it wouldn't be too shocked, except I was. Look at readiness for 10th grade. Look at that percentile. If all we're doing is basing it on that RIT chart, we're not quite getting there, because look at 10th grade, 83rd percentile before they're ready for the math assessment, before they're predicted to score ready. That's a pretty high percentile. That is not indicated on that RIT chart. That's 50th percentile on the RIT chart. So something to think about. I get questions a lot from school districts and they'll go, should we focus on the RIT or should we focus on the percentile? And my answer is, it depends on what you're looking for, right? If you're trying to determine what that student is ready for and you want something direct that you want to go in and do with that student, you need to focus on the RIT. If we want to talk about what they're projected to score later on, or should they be in the readiness category, then you might focus on the percentile. I like a combination of the two. So know that this is here. I think this is super helpful. I would probably print pages 15 and 16 and keep it handy for everybody. We need to be able to refer back to that. But all the data is here and all the information is here. If you have someone that goes, but I don't understand how they did this, you can share this link with them. It's a 26-page document. It's the NWEA linking study. Okay. So we've identified students based on projected proficiency. We can understand where the projected proficiency comes from if we read this 26-page document, right? We get it. We know where this comes from now. We at least have the resource to go back and look at. So we know who the kids are, but we still need to know what. What are we notorious for doing to teachers? We go do this, but we don't tell you how or what, right? So we need to know what to do. And a lot of times we avoid the learning continuum. And I get it. I'm going to tell you, guilty. I have avoided the learning continuum before. Anybody ever been in the learning continuum? Anybody ever just been in it? When you were in it, did you get an overwhelming feeling like defeat? Almost like you instantly go, this is the reaction I get every single time, everywhere I go. Someone in the room is brave enough to go, I can't do all this. I can't do all this. So here's what I'm going to tell you. The learning continuum, we need to go into the learning continuum to get specific information. Okay, that's what we need to do. We need to go in and get specific information. It doesn't feel like that to a classroom teacher when they open it up. So I want all of you to feel the same overwhelming feeling that classroom teachers feel, whether you're a classroom teacher, administrator, whatever. I want all of us to feel the same feeling. So your heart starts racing, you get a little anxiety, and you start to get a little upset, okay? Just because this is important. And then I'm going to show you a process that we're going to take teachers through on how to do this. All right, let me come back to my blue banner over here. It's going to make me log back in. Surely it's going to make me log back in. Okay, if you'll go back and log in to where you have you're probably logged in. If you go to your tab that has the blue banner, that's what we're looking for, the tab with the blue banner. Oh, where's my blue banner? We're going to go to this report right here, the Learning Continuum. And we're going to just have some consistency here as we go in. We're going to all choose a class and we're going to choose reading. We want to be looking at this something similar as we go through this. Mine's going to be different. And I can pick a school. I'm going to pick my teacher, my class. And right here is where you're going to pick reading. Whatever reading you have offered in that teacher that you have, that's the one I want you to pick. Okay, so make sure you choose the reading assessment. And then we're going to go in and we're going to click view report. And you should have this. How are we doing? Sherry, can you kind of take a look around and let me know if we are here? I'm trying to move that. Okay. All right. So here's what I want you to notice. All we're going to do is you see that reading is the assessment. We see the dark green tabs, which say literature, informational text, vocabulary acquisition and use. Those are the 3 topics in the reading assessment. And then we get some more information. Within literature, we know that they've done an assessment on key ideas and details and craft and structure. Within informational text, key ideas and details, craft and structure. And within vocabulary acquisition and use, we get context clues and reference and word relationships and nuance. Now, all we're going to do is we're just going to pick one of these 6 drop-down bars, just one. So everybody choose this one and click on it. I want you to open that tab. And scroll down and look at the information and scroll down. Oh, I have 2 students. I don't really know what this means, but I have 2 students right there. And then I look and I go, okay, I've got 5. And it's usually right about here that your teachers are going, I can't do all this. Y'all remember, this is just one of the 6 areas. So this is about when that brave soul is going to go, I can't do all this and teach my grade level standards, right? Like you've probably heard that before. That is not the intention. So we're going to go through a process on how to teach others how to use the learning continuum. Now, the first thing I want to point out to you, do you notice there are no standards? Does anybody see a standard anywhere? These are all skills. Do you see that they're skills? It's no standards. The other thing I want you to notice is you see these lines. This has to be taught. This seems like it's intuitive, and to some people it is, but not to everyone. Do you see this line that goes across here? This is the end of this wristband, and the beginning of the next RIT band. And I tell you that because some of your teachers are going to scroll and scroll and scroll, and it's going to take forever before they get to the end of that RIT band, right? So we need to actually show them this is the end, and this is the beginning of the 191 to 200 RIT band, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students in that RIT band. And this is giving you the information about what those 5 students are ready to do right now. Now, all of this would be much easier for us as classroom teachers if it were written in terms of standards, right? Because we know what standard we're teaching. Or if you've identified your essential standards and you want to go address learning loss, you probably are going to focus on your essentials. You know that standard. So here's what we're going to do. I want everybody to do this together. This is very important. You might want to write some of these little steps down, but it is also in that PowerPoint. If you will come back and collapse that back where it looks like this with all the green stripes. Do you notice up here in the blue banner, it says edit display options? Click that. By default, the learning continuum is always going to be grouped by topic. We want to group by standard. So I'm going to choose group by standard. Here's the other thing I tell teachers when I go in and do this with them. Choose every single grade level available. Even if you're high school and you have the option to pick first grade, choose it. You might find that you have some students that are still ready for something from first grade. So choose every single grade level that is available to you. You may not have all grade levels, but whatever's available, choose them all. And then click close. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open up the exact same drop down we were just in, that we just scrolled through and got a little anxious and thought, oh my goodness, this is a lot. These are a lot of topics. Kids are in all different places. We're going to go back in now and open that same one up. And now what do you see? Standards. Okay. So here's how this is helpful. If you're going to address learning loss from last year, you probably want to focus on essential standards. That's why we do the essential standards work, right? Like, what is the big overarching thing that we know for sure that third graders have to master before they go to fourth grade? That's that essential standard work. If you have not done the essential standard work, I have a solution for you today, okay? So let me take you to your solution. I'm gonna jump back to my presentation here. Here's the solution. See if it starts from that page. DESE has what they call the back to school playbook. Back to school playbook. And when you get into DESE's back to school playbook, they have identified the K through 8 essential curriculum, not the essential standards, but the essential curriculum. And I'm going to tell you, they are written in terms of learning targets. So they are the essential learning targets by grade level. Now, a group of Arkansas educators came together and did this work with DESE. So these are Arkansas educators working on Arkansas curriculum. And they have identified K through 8 essential curriculum. They're written in learning target format. So for example, you'll notice over here, and by the way, it's only K through 8, but you'll notice you get K through 2, 3 through 5, and 6 through 8. I went into the 3 through 5 and then chose the third grade curriculum to show you these are all the learning targets. There's your language, there's your math, there's your science, there's your social studies. More than likely, you guys are all doing what we are doing, and we are focusing on English and math, essential standards for our summer school academy. And I'm going to tell you about our summer school academy also, because that's another solution for you. But we're focusing on literacy and math, and we're focusing on essential curriculum. These are all written in terms of learning targets, but guess where a learning target comes from? What did the Arkansas educators get together with to determine the essential learning targets? The standards. So you can backwards map If you want to, you can backwards map. This is just an example. I am not telling you that RL 0.3.1 is an essential standard. I'm just giving you an example. The very first identified learning target here says read and understand grade level texts. For example, stories, dramas, and poetry. Now, I know that the reading assessment is made up of literature and informational text. If I see stories, dramas, and poetry, I'm thinking that came from a reading literature standard. That's why it's RL. Then I went into the RL standards, our own third grade standard document, and I found RL 0.3.1. So here's how we read that. Reading literature, third grade, and the first standard. And it says, ask and answer questions for understanding of a text. Okay, that's the standard. I could see how you could get this learning target out of that standard, but this is just an example. I'm not telling you that's essential. I'm just saying that's in my work. That's what I found, okay? So we're going to go into that learning continuum to be specific, to identify what kids are ready to do for RL 0.3.1. Does that make sense? I'm not looking at everything when I scroll down now. Now I'm going to be very focused on just going in for that standard. We've changed it to standards. So let me go back. Where's my learning continuum? I think it's here. Yep. Okay, so here I am back in my learning continuum. You want to go to yours, wherever yours is. When you scroll down, notice I'm in the first RIT band, but what do you see over there on the right? No students. If I don't have students in there, I don't have to worry about that RIT band. I don't have any students that are in that category. So I'm going to keep scrolling down until I find a RIT band with students. And I'm going to look for RL 0.3.1. And notice there's my Deborah and Martin. Deborah and Martin are in the 181 to 190 RIT band. These are all the things that Deborah and Martin are ready to do in all these different standards. Doesn't mean I have to go do all that. It means I'm going to be specific and I'm going to go look for this one. Got it? Now, I'm just going to tell you, Deborah and Martin are two kids that I identified for learning loss. This is an essential standard that I identified for third grade. They're going on to fourth grade. They are still ready to do all these things from that third grade essential standard. Are you with me? Does that make sense what I'm doing here? Here's the trick. This is where I tell teachers all the time. Let's not look at it in the learning continuum anymore. Let's take it out and put it somewhere else. So we can just focus on that information. So you need to have this already done. Where is it? I think it's, here it is. You need to have an example already done before you walk other teachers through it so you can see what's going on here. Do you see that in this document, and we'll talk about how I created this document here in just a second. Do you see all that I'm focusing on is one essential standard, RL 0.3.1. I went to the learning continuum and I got to RIT band 181 to 190. Do you see that? I had two students in that RIT band and they happened to be Deborah and Martin. I'm going to copy that information out of the learning continuum and paste it in this table. Note, make note of this, y'all. The bullets don't transfer. You have to go back and add them, but it's very obvious where they go. You can tell where the bullets go. They just don't transfer. So that's the only thing I had to do is go back and add bullets in front of all these pieces. Okay, so I just took it out and I put it somewhere else. So now I'm going to bounce back to my learning continuum to show you something. Now let's think about this. Deborah and Martin were really low on my in need of support column. They had a really low RIT score. They, chances are, have a bigger gap. So what's the feeder standard? What standard? They might have some stuff they're still ready for from second grade. So what's the feeder standard to RL 0.3.1? How do our standards work? Does anybody know what the feeder one is? RL 0.2.1. So look what I notice. Look, these two students, Deborah and Martin, are still ready for something from that second grade feeder standard. We probably should go back and hit that before we try to hit what's in the third grade standard. Does that make sense? And if you'll notice, look at this. What do you see up above that one? RL.1.1. There's still something from first grade. They're still needing to, they're ready. This is what they're ready to do. So they're right now ready to make inferences about setting. And they're right now ready to do all those things in that second grade standard. Can we do some of those together? Absolutely. We just need the information because that's going to drive what we do with those two students. So I take it out, I put it in this chart, and look what I did here. I'm going to show you the rest of it. Here's RL.3.1. And then I went, whoa, wait a minute. They're still ready for RL.2.1. And they have a little piece they're still ready for from RL.1.1. See, that's that first column. Just copy and paste, take it out of the learning continuum. Now, look at this. If I scroll down and I go to my next RIT band, I'm going to look for the line that goes all the way across. Now I'm in my next RIT band, and I'm going to look and see if I have students. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go back and I'm going to find my RL.3.1. I'm going to copy and paste it. I'm going to pull it out of here. I don't know anymore because I've had to scroll down so far. I don't know if those are the exact same bullets that the last group was ready for or not. I don't know if those are the same things or if they're different. So I need to be able to compare them. I need to put them side by side. So look what I did. Well, why is that in my way? Make that go away. How do I do that? There it goes. Go up here. And notice that in my 191 to 200 RIT band, I have 5 students. I would give some identifying information here because maybe only 2 of those 5 students were in need of support. I don't know, but you need to identify those kids. But I pulled that standard out and look, now they're side by side. I can do a comparison. Are these 7 kids all ready for the same thing in that standard? Can I do the same thing with those kids? So that's to answer your question that you had. If they're ready for the same things, do them together. Just let those move on when they're done. And then if you scroll down here, this group only had these 2 pieces that they were still ready for from the second grade standard, and they didn't have anything from the first grade standard. So you see how to incorporate that. And if you scroll down to the next one, the next group in my example, they only have some things that they're ready for from that third grade standard. So back in my learning continuum, I can scroll down, down, down. Oh, I'm in the next RIT band. Should be 191 to 201 to 210. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 kids in here. And they are all still ready for, oh, I must be in a RIT band past that. It must have been this RIT band. I pulled that. Because this group, they are, oh yeah, there it is right there. 0.3.1. They're still ready for those pieces in that RL.3.1. So here's what's happening. We're teaching teachers that we can use the learning continuum to go in and get specific information on a specific standard, right? We have to have a structured process where people go through that in order to learn how to use the learning continuum. I went to a school district 2 years ago and they said, our teachers keep getting in the learning continuum and they don't understand how to use it. It was a math team. And I said, okay, I'll come and do a training with them on how to do that. So I want to share with you what we did in that math team, because it was during the school year and it was specific based on a lesson they were in right then. So let me go in here. Let me grab testing. It would be an NWEA. I can just glance at it and see it. I had it open, but there you go. But we did it. I went in with the math teachers and I said, okay, tell me, here it is. Tell me what standard you are working on right now. It was a 5th grade group of teachers. And they said, we are covering this standard right here. And I said, okay, let's go into the learning continuum. Let's be specific and let's only get the information of what your students are ready to do on that standard that you are teaching right now. So you have that information. But we have to consider the what standard? The feeder standard. What standard feeds into this? Because they may have some gaps. If you're just going to go in and teach a lesson, we probably want to know, are there some gaps for these students, and what are those gaps? So we want to back up, and we want to look also at the same time, look for the fourth grade standard. Are you with me? So they went to the learning continuum. They did it by standard. They found this information. We pulled it out and put it in this chart, and they can see how to differentiate the task. Look how obvious it is on how to differentiate the task. You can homogeneously group, and then you can say, you know what? I mean, these 6 kids right here, they're really all ready for the same thing on my 5th grade standard, but I need to do something they're pretty much ready for the same thing on the 4th grade standard, but I need to do something a little bit different for these 2 than for these 4. And I can't remember how many were in this group, 6. So I think they did 3, 3. They did 2 groups of 3 over here, 1 group of 4, and a group of 2. Everybody's task that day had 3 parts. Everybody had this part. Everybody see, everybody's ready for this on grade level? Very easy for the teacher to write, because look how easy that is to understand. These students are ready to order decimals to the thousands with a different number of digits after the decimal point. 5th grade math teacher can write that, no problem. What we did for these 2 groups is added this. Okay, they're ready to do it with the same number of digits after the decimal point, and they're still ready to decompose whole numbers within 10,000 into thousands. So we need to make sure we add that to it, because we need to make sure we're having that conversation with them, because that's still a little piece that they're ready for from 4th grade. Does that make sense? And then they could see that they could differentiate here. These are the 3 parts. And what they did here, so that this group they don't have more parts, right? They had 3 parts, but within one of the parts, they had 3 different questions. They had 3 different things they had to do. And so that's how we can use the learning continuum to be specific. Okay, how many of you have ever had to have an intervention or provide interventions with a group of students, and you have exhausted all resources? You have used everything you could use in the Florida Center for Research or whatever it is, the FCRR. You've used it to death, and you don't have anything else in there, and you're going, I don't know what else to do. Ever happened? Yes. But what if we were to go in and get the specific information from the learning continuum? It's probably going to go, oh, well, I can just do that. That's easy. So we can go into the learning continuum for specific information instead of trying to take it all in and think, you can't do all that, right? So we don't have to get anxious. We can just go in and look for what we need. Enrichment, I believe enrichment should be an intervention, right? We got to have the growth indicator. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. So if I have some kids that need enrichment, they're on the other end of that learning continuum. You got to keep scrolling down a long ways. We don't get down there because we shut down before we get down there. If you scroll down there and you get that specific information on what they're ready for, it may be on a grade level standard much higher than yours, but the skill can be done on your grade level, right? Like you don't have to teach a higher standard, but you can take that skill and do it with some grade level content. So you can help enrich kids that need that enrichment intervention. Okay, and I know that's not necessarily learning loss, but that's just a process on how to go through the learning continuum. Okay, I'm gonna give you a minute to process, talk to each other, think about how you could do this, how you could implement it right now, because y'all listen, when we start the school year, if you don't do summer school, we need a plan for day 1. What are we gonna do on day 1? See if you can kind of come up with some thoughts and ideas on how you might be able to use some of this information to get some ideas for that, okay? And I'm gonna come show you what we did first. And so we'll take about 4 or 5 minutes just to kind of talk it out, kind of get your thoughts straight.
administrators have said, you know, I'm creating a new body categories for their classroom, which ones are your support and what's their writ with them, which is how check your writ with them. So that means you have to read. You can pull, you know, from last year's third grade group, your third grade teachers list, and you support they're all in this short man school, this. So we don't lose any time. And if you want to use these start with that, use the learning continuum to see what those particular kids are ready for, and that standard. That's a good idea. Yeah, that's what we did.
So you might want to go into multiple classrooms and look, and you might go to K2, so you can see they're not done by projected proficiency. You have to do those by writ bands. Okay, how are we doing out here? I'm gonna check the chat real quick. I guess, Sherry, you haven't seen anything. Okay. I'm just checking chat. Yeah, we're great. Okay, I'm hearing a lot of conversation about what you can do and where to start, and just that processing time I think is helpful. I know as an administrator, I would come to NWEA trainings and I loved all the reports and I loved learning about all of them, but I needed time to push buttons and play around a little bit more, and I didn't have my own data a lot of times yet. So I just wanted you to be able to kind of click around, play, pull some reports, and right now make some decisions on some plans, because the urgency is we have to identify the students with learning loss, and then we have to have a plan on how to address it, whatever that looks like. Okay, so some options that we've thrown out there: that extended year, which includes summer school, or whether we hit it hard at the beginning of school, back to school in your RTI program, or whether a teacher asked me in one of the co-ops, she said, so is this tier 1 or tier 2? And I said, I wish I could answer that, but it depends on your data, right? If your data shows that it's pretty much everybody, then it's tier 1. If you can identify kids in groups and you can say, you know what, these need this and these need this, which is something different, then it's tier 2, and we can pull them out and do tier 2. So I can't give you a blanket answer on that. It's going to depend on your data. That's why as building leaders, you want to come up with a structure right now so that teachers have to give you that information, because you need to know who we got to identify. We need to have a plan for how we're going to address it. We, in our summer academy that I'll tell you about here in a little bit, our summer academy, we're going to focus on essential curriculum. We're focusing on what's in that DESE playbook for literacy and math. Because we feel like if we go back and if we take our kids going into 4th grade and we look at 3rd grade essentials, and that's what we focus on, then that's the plan. And y'all, I can tell you, I was a summer school teacher for many, many years. Nobody ever told me what to focus on. I just developed the summer school curriculum. Do y'all remember that? Like, that's how we did it. So I think we need to be very targeted and intentional in our plans as we think that through. And I'm not saying it has to be the essential curriculum, just whatever your plan is needs to be intentional to address the learning loss. Yes, Will.
So one of the things that like stuck out with me is like a 191 is like, you know, then a 220 is good. Sometimes like they're not taught teachers in their 1st grade that they can't do this standard in 3rd grade, but they're going to keep repeating this standard in the next 2 years. So I think for teachers sometimes it's like they don't like, it's like this idea that they have to master it by this grade, whereas these bands across.
That's right. And it's always good to keep referring them back to, but that's what this child is ready for right now, right? Even though they're sitting in a 5th grade, there's a piece of that 5th grade standard they're ready for. There's just still a piece of the 4th grade standard and a piece of the 3rd grade standard, which guess what that causes? That causes a gap. And that's how that gap continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger if we're always only focusing on that grade level standard and we never look back to see what is that child ready for from 3rd grade or 2nd grade or 1st grade, because we're just making the gap bigger, right? And I know that the 10th grade teachers are usually the hard. Do I have any high school people in here? Secondary? Yeah, we kind of. So 10th grade teachers, they're usually the hardest because your 10th grade teachers will go, I'll show you in a minute one of the things I take them through because I'm going to give you all my stuff. Okay, you're going to have all my through the year stuff. But I take the teachers through this one process where they, for the first time, go in and they look at their students scoring the lowest RIT and they go, what are they scoring like? Well, they're scoring like they're ready for beginning of the year 3rd grade. You can imagine in reading, you can imagine what a 10th grade teacher is going to say when they see they have a student sitting in their classroom that's ready for beginning of the year 3rd grade. Here's what they say every time. How did that student get here? And I always ask the exact same question and nobody's answered it yet, but here's my question. I don't know, but are you going to let them go to 11th grade? Nobody answers that question because we all know the answer to that question, right? Yes. And so the response is when you know it, you have to do something about it. So if you have a student sitting in 10th grade that's ready for beginning of the year 3rd grade reading, that child needs interventions immediately. And it needs to be where they're ready, which is 3rd grade, ready for beginning of the year 3rd grade. That's what they're ready for. That makes sense? So it's a hard conversation across the board. It's hard. I mean, it's hard because you're sitting there going as a 10th grade teacher, I can't teach. I'm not trained in 3rd grade. And it's hard in the other direction. If you have a 4th grade math teacher and they've got a student that's ready for 7th grade math, that's a conversation. They're going to come to you and they're going to go, I teach 4th grade math. I don't teach 7th grade math, right? And it's not that you have to teach the 7th grade standards, it's that we have the information of the skills that that student is ready for, that we can do on that level. Okay, so that's really a lot. That's really the significance of the learning loss. We have to identify them, and then we have to come up with a plan of what to do. What are we going to do? We're going to focus on essentials. Then we need to go in and grab that essential information. We need to pull it out of the Learning Continuum. We need to start the year hitting the essentials. If it's tier 1, then every 4th grade teacher is probably going to be hitting all the essentials from 3rd grade in the first week. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. If that's tier 1, we're going to have to include it in tier 1. That's for everybody. If it's tier 2, it's probably going to be in your RTI in the pullout. Okay. What I have, these are my thoughts here. Let me go down. I'm going to share with you all of my presentations for analyzing through the year data. It's really hard to start in May and go, okay, let's just analyze this data and let's determine our learning loss if we haven't had that structure in place all through the year, right? And so that conversation, being the conversation all through the year is really important. So I told you that I would map out conversations for my team meetings at the beginning in the summertime before school started. Now, this is a process that has evolved because as I came to APSRC, I knew what I did, but then I spent a lot of time with NWEA and I started learning other things and I started monitoring. And that's what we do in education, right? We take when we learn, we take what we've been doing and we make it better. And so I have a process for you and all of you can have it. You can have my presentations. You can have all my graphic organizers that I've created. You can have videos of me doing the training so that you can go do it yourself if you want to. Okay. Anything that I have when I give to you, there are people in the room that know this about me. Anything that I have and I give to you, it's yours. So make it your own. Okay. If you change it, just take the last slide off, which has my name on it. Just make it your own. I don't care. Okay. Edit it, take out the things you want it to look different. It's fine with me. So here's where you're going to go to get all of this information. We're going to go to apsrc.net. And we put this out here. It's free to the public. So a lot of things on our website, you have to be a member for to go and get, but this is important. We need everybody having these conversations through the year. So we have a lot of things going on at APSRC, and you'll see our banner is going to change, and that gives you an idea of a lot of the things that are going on. We have a lot going on. But here's what I want to tell you. I'm a co-director in the teaching and learning department. So you're going to scroll down on our website to teaching and learning. Again, there are several clicks, and I'll tell you when to bookmark, okay? So we're going to go to teaching and learning. Click on that button. And you should see about teaching and learning. Now on the mobile device, it's different because I know on the iPad it was different. So you guys, it's going to be a little bit different on you getting there. I can't remember the steps, but we'll get you there. And you want to go to T&L resources. That's teaching and learning resources. And when you go to teaching and learning resources, the very first thing that pops up is professional learning with NWEA. And you can see it's a 3-part video series, and you can click read more. You need to click read more. And here it is. This is where all the information is, and you can have it. You can have it. So I would bookmark this page. And I'll tell you when I would do which piece, and then we're going to go through and get a quick rundown of each one so you know. But here's the thing to know. There's always a video of me doing the training. So you have options. The intention was that the video of me doing the training is that it's short enough for you to show it in a team meeting. So they're all around 30, 40 minutes. You can show it during a team meeting. But you could also, you watch the video, and then you can have the PowerPoint and any other documents that go with it, and you can do it. Okay, either way is perfectly fine with me. So I'm going to go in. I don't know if I have part 1 open. That's part 3, part 2. I'm going to open part 1. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to download part 1. And I'm going to tell you that I would do part 1 in your back to school in-service. I would do this in back to school PD. And I would do this year after year. I would do this every year. I know sometimes what we do is we do something one time because we feel like we've gotten the word out to our teachers, and we might not ever come back to it or revisit it. But this needs to be done year after year. And I'm going to tell you, part 1, back to school PD, it's all about ESSA and your accountability system. The reason this is here in professional learning with NWEA is, do you know that you probably have teachers sitting in the building that don't know why we're even using NWEA? Why are we even doing this? Why are we talking about this? I mean, why? What is the reason? There are so many things that when we do this training, every time, everywhere we go, and we do this training, about 3 years ago, I went on a mission. I was like, I'm going to show this to every single teacher there is in the state of Arkansas. And I realized that's a lot. That's a lot of people. But I tried really hard. But this is really important because you know what happens in the audience? Every time, undoubtedly, a teacher will turn to their friend and they'll go, that's why we're using that program that we're using in that before school tutoring. Or they'll be like, oh, that's why we have to do da da da. So think about it this way. Some of you may have said this, some of you may have heard this. Listen, we're a C school and that's not acceptable. I expect it to be a B. And it's like, mic drop, right? Like that's the end of the conversation. So what did we forget to do? How? Just do better. With what? like how do I do this, right? And so we have to give more information. And so this is super important training. So I'm going to jump ahead to my favorite slide. I'm going to go through all this. You can watch the video. You will understand every bit of it. I promise. I wrote this with the perspective of a classroom teacher, not an administrator. Administrators did this training over and over and over at all kinds of places and all over the state. And half the time they would come to this one with the perspective of the teacher and go, oh, I didn't realize that, right? So you want to go through it, but you can do it really easily. This is my favorite slide in the whole thing because the very first indicator in ESSA is weighted achievement. Now, weighted achievement on one of those slides back before tells you that it's 35% of your letter grade. So it's significant. But what's different is that it's weighted. So if you are a teacher back from the benchmark days, we're on an old mindset sometimes. And that old mindset is you had to hit proficiency to get credit. You either got credit or you didn't. Right? Do y'all remember those days, benchmark days? We either passed it and got credit or you didn't pass it and you didn't get anything. So we have a whole lot of successes that teachers need to know about and celebrate. And the very first one is in the point value. See the point value across the top there? Do you see how in need of support is 0? We get it. Nobody's going to complain there. We all understand that. But look at your first celebration. Look what you get for kids that are close. Who knew? Right? Who knew? We get half a point for kids that are close. We've never gotten that before. Look at ready. We get 1 point for kids that are ready, which I like to call twice as many points as we get for kids that are close. You get twice as many if they're ready than you get if they're close. But look at exceeding. Did y'all know that? There's a little word there that's got a pretty big meaning. What's the little tiny word there? Or. Well, if I'm operating on a point system, do I want 1 point for those kids or do I want 1.25 for those kids? I want 1.25. So I need to know how that happens. So here's our first aha time, right? Everybody has an aha moment here. We have 3 scenarios. Look at your top row. How many these, and I tell them, there are only 2 places that DESE is going to look in order to determine if you get 1 point for your exceeding kids or if you get 1.25. There are only 2 places. The first place they're going to look, is it in need of support? My computer's dying. Is that in need of support? So when you go to in need of support in that top row, how many students do you see there? 5. When you go all the way over, this is the only other place DESE is going to look. How many kids do you see exceeding in that top row? 2. Since there are 2 exceeding and 5 in need of support, you get 1 point for each of those 2 that are exceeding. 1 point, because 2 is less than 5. Okay. By the way, I spent a lot of time studying and reading the business rules for our ESSA, for our accountability system to save you that time. Okay. So I'm going to show you the rule here in just a minute for the business rules. Look at the middle row. How many kids do you see in need of support? 3. How many kids do you see exceeding? Those 2 numbers are the same, 1 point apiece. So you don't get anything in the first 2 scenarios. You don't get anything anymore for kids that are exceeding than you get for kids that are ready. Because the business rules, from the business rules, the rule is if the number of kids exceeding is less than or equal to the number of kids in need of support, you only get 1 point apiece. Now, it seems like that bottom row would be intuitive, but it's not. How many kids do you see in need of support? 2. How many kids do you see exceeding? 5. You get 1 point for 2 of them, and you get 1.25 for the additional 3. Do you see how that works? So this is pretty important information for a teacher, because now I'm going, oh, okay, so which kids do I need to move? Name a group of students that would be helpful to move in this scenario. You jumped ahead of me, Will. Just one group, name one group in need of support. We've got to make sure the number of kids in need of support is as small as possible so we can get more of that weighted credit, right? We also know that no matter where a student in need of support goes, we're going to get more than we get for them there, right? No matter where they go, we're going to get more points. Okay, now name another group of kids that we need to move. Okay, did y'all hear that? This is always a very teachable moment. Somebody just said ready, for those of you out there. Somebody just said ready. Do we ever say we have to move kids that are already ready? We really don't think like that, do we? But we do. We've got to move the ready kids because I need more kids exceeding than I have in need of support to get that weighted credit. So I need to move my ready kids. Okay, name another group of students that it would be helpful to move. Close. We know if we move our close to ready, we get twice as many points, right? So we need to move all kids, which is what Will went to. We've got to move them all. And I tell you this because I was in a school district helping them with their RTI. And I heard it was an instructional facilitator. It was a group, it was a whole room of instructional facilitators, and we were working on RTI. And the instructional facilitator said, why would we focus on these kids that are so low that we will never get them ready, instead of focusing on kids that are so close that we could get them ready easily? And they asked that question out loud. And you know what I heard? Bubble kids. I heard an adult that is still on the old accountability system. So you may have people in your buildings that are still thinking and functioning off of our old accountability system. And we already know that one didn't work, right? Like it wasn't, we weren't looking at all kids. We were only looking at bubble kids. So heard that and I thought, oh goodness, we need to do the ESSA training so that we can see, because we've got to move them all. We have to move all kids. Now I've kind of tricked you here and I'm going to give you that insight. You don't have all the information. You've actually left a group of kids out. Anybody know which group of kids you didn't say we had to move? The exceeding, but I'm going to prove to you here in a second, you got to move them. And I like to surprise teachers with this information. So I want you to see that I go through all of this in my video and it's animated on the PowerPoint, so you can't mess this up, okay? You can do this training, I promise. And we're going to go into growth. Next, celebration. I don't know about y'all, but I was a high school math teacher. Math and literacy, nobody was held more accountable under our old system than math and literacy, right? And I would have a student that was really low. I would work really hard all year long for that student. We'd work. I'd see so much growth. I'd come in whatever it was, October back then, and all the papers would be spread out on the table because we didn't have anything digitally. And we'd pilfer through all those papers until I could find that student. And you know what? Didn't get there. Got close, but didn't get there. Came a long way from that low. It was called below basic at the time. Came a long way, but we got nothing for growing that student, right? We didn't get any credit. So this is a huge celebration for teachers. You do get credit for growth. And not only that, elementary and middle school, which is what all of you are, it's half of your letter grade. Growth is more significant than anything else. And shouldn't that be the case? That is absolutely what we do. We're in the business to grow kids. Like, this is a huge celebration, but we have to know how it's done in order to understand why we need a growth tool such as NWEA, right? So I have information for you. High school people, it's 35% of your letter grade. It's just as heavy as achievement, which is significant. So we go through all that in the training, and here's what I want to tell you. Tim and Anna, in this example, they're in the same grade. They are the same age, in the same grade. Tim is expected to score in May where that blue dot is. You see that blue dot? That line for Tim is built on Tim's historical performance on summative assessments. Has nothing to do with Anna. So look at Anna's. You see Anna's expected score in May? It's not the same expectation for Anna that it is for Tim, because Anna's score is based on her historical performance. Every single one of your students are based on their own historical performance. They get a trajectory, that's what that line is called, and then a point goes on there. Did you know that by September of this year, the department will already know what every single one of your students should score in May of 2022? Did you know that? You're not going to get those numbers. They don't come to you, but they know them. They know what every single one of your kids are expected to score. So you need a growth tool that will give you a projection from the fall assessment to what kids should score based on their own performance by the end of the year, which guess what does that? What assessment do you have that does that? NWEA. When you take it in the fall, don't they give you a projected score in the spring? Every single student? And it's not the same per student for everybody in grade level. It's based on that individual performance. So you have to have a growth tool that you monitor. Are you ready for this phrase? Through the year to determine if you're going to hit the target or not. Now, let me tell you something else. Let me show you how it's scored. If you look at what actually happened, let's pretend we're going to fast forward to this August and we get our actual scores in, and look at what Tim did. He actually scored much higher than what was expected of him. So that is called exceeded expected growth. Do you see it? So here's how they're going to calculate your growth score. We're going to talk growth score for a minute because this is important. It's 50% of your letter grade. It's half of your letter grade. It's how you move from a B to an A. Okay. They're going to subtract those two. They're going to take what he actually did and subtract what was expected of him. Next to his state ID number in your spreadsheet, they're going to put a positive number that represents the difference. Okay, that's good. We want that because that means exceeded expected growth. But look at what Anna did. What'd she do? She scored exactly what was expected of her. I don't know about y'all, but I'm celebrating if that happens. But that's a 0 because when you subtract those two numbers, they're the same. They're going to put a 0 next to Anna. And a lot of times when I tell that, teachers automatically go, that's not fair because she grew. It's not a 0 like we think of zeros. A 0 in your growth spreadsheet translates to an 80. Not an 80% or an 80 percentile, an 80. It's just a raw number 80. And 80 means met expected growth. So what will little positives, if that's a 0 and it translates to an 80, what will little positive numbers do to my 80? They're going to make it higher. So if you go in and you look at your school's growth score and your school's growth score is an 84, what does that mean? Well, it means your school was able to exceed expected growth. Does that make sense? Here's the problem. Let's say this happens. Tim comes in, he has a really bad day. That happens. You guys know that, right? Kids come in for their summative assessment and they've had a bad day. He takes that test. What kind of number is going to go in the spreadsheet for Tim now? Little negative number. Look at Anna. She still grew. She just didn't grow as much as what was expected, but it's still going to be a negative. Now, here's my question for you. This is how we get to those exceeding kids. This is how you convince teachers we have to focus on exceeding kids. Who are the hardest kids to get to grow? The top kids. You know why? We get a room full of top kids and we walk in and we go, oh, good. Whew. They already know it. This is going to be an easy year. But guess what? They're more than likely causing you negative points on your growth indicator than anybody because we have done that, right? That's kind of what we've done historically. We're like, whoo, good. Yes. Yep. So they've done the research and they've backed up and they took that data point out. And so what I know right now, and there are still what do they have that? There's an ESSA committee that's still meeting. But what I do know is that they are keeping that, they're keeping their trajectories. It didn't make any differences with that whole. So what I don't know is I don't know if that trajectory is going to be based on 1 year or 2 years yet. I think that was the question that we asked that you and I talked about. Yep.
I got the report that
Does it? See, I don't know. I haven't heard the official decision because I know when I told you, I knew they were meeting that. I found out they were meeting that next week. So I never heard the official. Got it. So it was discussed, but not made final.
I don't have anything.
Yep. Yep.
So what I did know is that the check actually would be what would be adjusted based off of the last.
Right. Right, from the year before. And I don't know that any of those have been decided. I don't know where they are on that. So yeah, those are great questions. But I would still address this as if that didn't happen. Just because, what are we really trying to do? I mean, we have a lot of things that we have to get answered. You know, especially on the administration side, we have to know, there are several things that we have to have answers to, and I get that. But we really need to even understand how it's scored, right? Just to understand, if it were not these crazy times that we've just lived through, which we did, this is how it was done prior to COVID, and it's how it will be continuing on. We just have to get through that little kink of what are we going to do for this little tiny time period. So here are the things. We've got to remember that it's our exceeding kids that are probably going to cause us negative points, and that growth indicator is half your letter grade. So remember earlier I said I really believe that enrichment is an intervention. Enrichment has to be an intervention, because that's how we're going to help that, and we have to focus on them. I also told you that I kind of tricked you, and you didn't say we have to move the exceeding kids. This is proof that we have to move the exceeding kids. I had that same first grade teacher, that one training I told you that she came up and she said, my school said I'm not doing really well. She goes, well, I'm not part of ESSA because I teach first grade. I said, oh my goodness, you're a huge part of ESSA. How do you think, if Tim and Anna were in third grade this year, what do you think they used to predict their third grade score? K1, 2. So it is very important. K1 and 2 is part of ESSA. That's how they get that third grade projection. It's based on K1 and 2. Now they have to do some statistics, and they have to do some. They have statisticians working on this, right? Like they work on how to make those two things correspond. But here's the other good news. Think about it like this: if you're an NWEA school, and DESE looks back at your NWEA historical data, and they make a prediction for third grade, guess what NWEA is using? Your NWEA historical performance to predict your third grade. So those should be pretty close together. They should be pretty close to the same. Okay, so that's how the growth piece works, and I think that's really important. There's a ton of other information in here that I think is really helpful for teachers to go through. We don't have time really to go through the whole entire thing. No, not yet. Not yet. Yep. So, and then graduation rate. So you can see all that, but this is something I wanted to hit, because when I started doing this, I would have administrators, they would stop me and they go, hey, listen, I'm not gonna have time to come to the training, but I need you to come and look at my school and tell me what my school needs to focus on. You know, look at my ESSA stuff and tell me what we need to focus on. And I was like, well, you know, maybe we want to come to the training, because look at what happens here in the end of the training. 35% of your letter grade is weighted achievement, and that includes reading. 50% of your letter grade is school value added growth, and that includes reading. 35% of your letter grade is school quality and student success score, and that includes reading. So we probably, no matter which school you are, need to focus on what? Reading. And even more specific, reading growth. Now, it was a shock to these people. And I can tell you, I am secondary. Sherry in the back is secondary. It makes secondary people shake and shiver, because obviously we have to focus on what? Reading growth. And that makes everybody kind of a little nervous. You know who Sherry and I taught AP Cal, she taught AP Lit. We had classrooms right beside each other. You know who I thought was teaching reading in high school? I thought she was. Like, she's the English teacher. I thought she did it, right? She didn't do it. Reading is taught in kindergarten, first and second grade. So that makes people anxious and makes people nervous, but that's where we came up with all of the secondary literacy information and trainings that have had to come out. And it makes teachers go, oh, I see, I get it. Okay, so there's that training. You can go through it. There's a lot more in there than just what I've shared, but it's yours. You can have it. You can watch me do it and then do it yourself if you want to do it that way. Perfectly fine. I do want to take you now to the next one to show you when I would do part 2. I would do part 2 after the fall assessment. As soon as the fall assessment is over, I'd do part 2. And I told you, this is a monitor and adjust kind of thing, right? When we know better, we do better. Now that projected proficiency is out there, or the linking study is out there, I would add this, I would change this up a little bit, and I'll tell you where I would change that at. But here's what I think is really helpful. This is a good thing to explain too. Did you know that MAP stood for something? Stands for measure of academic progress. And the word progress is important because that's that through the year data. Did you know that RIT stood for something? And this is something you want to get to your teachers. That stands for ready for instruction today. So anytime we talk about a student in terms of their RIT, we want to use the word ready for. Ready, ready, ready. So I teach them all about this. And I told you I took you guys through Googling the NWEA normative data. I have teachers do it and bookmark it. So you don't have to panic. It just takes that one little tiny piece off of you. So we do that there. We talk about the RIT data and that it all represents 50th percentile, which means it represents average. The average performance of a student like them. Not that it's grade level standards, that it's just the average performance of a student like them at that time. So we meet some students and we talk about how you could use this information. Here's Nick. He's in the 3rd grade. He scores a 197 on the end of year language usage. How am I going to use these charts to learn about Nick in language? Well, it's a 197. So I'm going to go to the language usage chart. I'm going to find the number that is the absolute closest to 197, no matter where it falls. And I see that it's right there. So here's what I know about Nick. Nick is sitting in the end of year 3rd grade and he's ready for beginning of the year 4th grade. Do you hear a gap? This child's ready to go on, right? We're good. Nick is great. We go back and we look at Tommy. Look at poor little Tommy. Tommy is also in the 3rd grade and he scores a 150 on the mid-year reading. Okay. This is information we might not have ever had before. We look at Tommy, we go to 150 and we find 150 is, why is that not going? There. 150 is right there. Or the number closest to 150 that we can get on the chart is right there. So here's what we know about Tommy. Tommy's sitting in the middle of 3rd grade year. He's ready for end of the year kindergarten. What might Tommy's behavior look like? Anybody have a Tommy? He might have some really bad behavior, right? He might be acting up. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I might act up too if I was afraid you were fixing to call on me to read. I mean, you get some survival skills, don't we? We all develop survival skills in certain situations. So do you think maybe somebody's ever said this about Tommy? Oh, that kid is so lazy. Can't get him to do anything. Can't get him to do any schoolwork. He just wants to play all day. It could be that Tommy's not lazy at all. It could be that there's an academic deficiency that's going on that we haven't addressed and we don't know it, and his behavior comes out as it's something else, right? It could be that Tommy's a total introvert. It could be that he is totally sucked up inside his shell and is thinking, if I don't make eye contact with her, she won't make eye contact with me, and I'll just skate on by, right? So we have all kinds of things that could be going on. So here's the answer. When we know it, we can't unknow it. We have to do something about it. Tommy has to have interventions immediately. So as soon as we give that fall assessment, we need to go in and we need to find these kids and they need to be put in RTI. Even if they're in the 10th grade and they're ready for beginning of the year 3rd grade, that has to happen. So meet Jordan. Here's Jordan. He scores a 227 on the beginning of the year math assessment. This is the one I was telling you earlier. Teacher goes in and looks and finds the number closest to 227, which is the end of the year 7th grade. Teacher may come to the office and go, hey, listen, I'm a 6th grade math teacher. I don't teach 7th grade. I don't teach 7th grade math. You don't have to teach 7th grade math. We just have to know what Jordan's ready for. And then you can do those skills on that 6th grade content by pushing him and giving him enrichment, pushing him deeper in the grade level content. Oh, and by the way, what might Jordan's behavior look like? He thinks you have an academic deficiency, right? Like that's real. I gave birth to one of these children and was his teacher. That's not fun. Because I was mom, he knew I had an academic deficiency. And then when I became his teacher, I absolutely, definitely had an academic deficiency. And I was nowhere near as smart as he is. And so we have these kids sitting in the classroom. And guess what? Jordan and Tommy are probably best friends. Even though they're in different grades. If they were in the same grades, they're probably best friends. Because that's probably how Tommy got to 3rd grade. He was hanging out with Jordan, right? So we have to know this information and we have to address that. And so that's where we want to do that. We want to show teachers the power in the information that you are getting. And then what do we do based on the answers? So I want to take them, and I do this one bite at a time, by the way. So I would only focus on the class report after the fall assessment. I would do this every single year in the fall. We would get a system that we do every single year. I would love it if I had been in my building long enough to not change my system, but I was still building it, right? And I kept changing it on my teachers every time. But wouldn't it be fabulous if your teachers knew that when they got together in September, they were going to study the class report and these are the things they're going to look for, and they would just have it done when they came to you? You'd be like, wow, that's great. So it's that consistency that is helpful for everyone. I promise you all the classroom teachers feel better if they know what's expected of them coming into that meeting too, right? So in the class report, here's what we look at. We look at the average RIT. Let me get to it here. I think I got it all graph. Yeah, I've got it on here. This is the graphic organizer on the other side. This is also in the website. You can have access to that. You can change it. But we look at the average RIT. That means how is this group scoring as a whole? So we pull that number out of the chart. And by the way, it's a 199.6. So I would want to go to my RIT chart and go, what does that mean? What are they scoring like? I would find the number closest to 199.6. And I would say this group of students is scoring like they're ready for, I think it's the beginning of the year, 7th grade, something like that. I don't remember. But that's what we want to think about. It's a 5th grade group of kids. So they're scoring pretty high, right? Like the average beginning of the year 7th grader. But then I go to the normed grade level RIT. That's the normative data in the chart. So I'm going to look here. It's here in this chart. I don't have to go back to the chart if they pull it over here. Unless you have multiple grade levels in the same class. Then they don't know what to pull because you have too many grade levels in the same class. They'll put stars. Then you have to go to your RIT chart. But that's a 193.9. My group is scoring a 199. The norm is a 193. This group is scoring significantly higher than the norm, which means just average. They're scoring significantly higher. I know something about my group. The other thing we do is we look at these color bands. And here are some really helpful information for NWEA. Red always means the same thing. All these colors always mean the same thing. So for example, red is low. Low is below the 21st percentile. Below the 21st percentile is really low, right? Blue is always high. It's always greater than the 80th percentile. Now, I always tell teachers when I do this training, I don't know your students, we haven't ever met, right? I haven't ever met your students, but here's what I know for sure. If you have students in red and you have students in blue, they don't need the same thing. Would you agree with that? Kids that are scoring below the 21st percentile, that's low. Kids that are scoring above the 80th percentile, that's high. They don't have the same need. But guess what we traditionally do? And I'm secondary, so I can definitely tell you. We traditionally, especially in secondary, we do one thing for all, right? They don't need the same thing. So we need to look at that breakdown and determine how do we have that. I can tell you I was in a school district this past year, and one of the teachers came in and she pulled her class report because I was walking them through their through the year data during the school year. And I was there for the fall assessment, and she pulled her report and she goes, oh, great. They're all in red and orange. I said, well, wait a minute. That's kind of good news. I mean, I understand that you just got a whole group of kids that are really low, but guess what? They're all in the same place. So you can do whole group instruction. They probably do need all the same thing, right? So that's really kind of good news. So it's helpful to just go through and look at that breakdown. Now on page 2, we get more specific on that assessment, and they give you the topic areas, and they tell you about the topic areas. What I have teachers do here is look at the standard deviation only. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you about standard deviation and why we do it this way. Standard deviation is telling us about the spread of the abilities in the classroom. So when you think about standard deviation, think about the spread of your academic abilities in the room. So if you have a high standard deviation, and I'm gonna give you that number in a minute, you have a diverse group in their academic abilities, right? Yes, isn't that good? Thank you, Will. If you have a low standard deviation, then your kids are pretty much performing the same. So that teacher where all the kids were in red and orange, every single kid in the whole classroom, her standard deviation was a low standard deviation. So here's what NWEA says. Standard deviations greater than 14 are high. Greater than 14, that's high. Standard deviations less than 10, that's low. There's this weird area between 10 and 14 where we just have to make some decisions. So standard deviations less than 10, here's what NWEA will tell you. Whole group instruction is appropriate. If you have a standard deviation less than 10, whole group instruction is appropriate. Think about my teacher with all the students being in red and orange. She could do whole group instruction. Now, what they will not say is whole group instruction is not appropriate otherwise. They're not saying that. Okay, not saying when whole group instruction is not appropriate. They're only telling you when whole group instruction is appropriate. Because there are times we have to do whole group instruction and with a very academic diverse group. Yes.
Is there a way to calculate the standard deviation for a group that you put together? So for example, if I took NI performance group.
Oh, interesting.
And I wanted to see what the standard deviation was for the group I put together, not the group that's in.
Will you email that to me and I'll send it on to Rick?
Yeah.
And get them to send that since a response back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be really helpful. Yeah, email that to me and I'll send that on.
Did you create a class in NWA manually?
It has to come from your e-school, right? Doesn't it all pull from e-school?
Well, but I don't know because we're making it well. It's our dyslexia group.
You can make classes?
No, this is you look at all of these students.
Oh. You could, but here's the thing that we've learned about that. That came up in another co-op. Another co-op, one of the teachers said, well, why don't we put them in classes where they're alike anyway? And I said, that's called tracking, and we've tried that before. And if you really want to wear a teacher out, you put them with only low kids, because guess what you don't have in the room to help you out as the classroom teacher? You have no input from the other end of the right? Like if you had them grouped all alike, you'd have a low standard deviation. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is, if you do that, that's called tracking. And we've tried it, and we learned it didn't work. Oh. Well, I think she's just trying to look at the whole grade level to see what the standard deviation is for the whole grade level. Are they scoring alike, or is there a huge academic diversity? Is that right, Tina? Yep. Yep. Right. And I'll tell you, I told you I'm pretty transparent. I can tell you what we did in my building for class lists. We put students on cards with all their data, and then we spread them out. If they were alike, we put one in each classroom. And then we went to the next group. Then we put one in each classroom. And I say we, meaning the classroom teachers, right? The current grade level classroom teachers, spread them out. So every class was really built with the same academic abilities within the room. Does that make sense? Because we learned a lot from tracking. It didn't work, right? The low stayed low. They didn't come up out of that. So just know that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it. Just remember, I do not work for NWEA.
The other thing would be like, you had a large number of one group branches. Does the standard deviation focus on the quantity as also as much as the total?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right, so here's what I have teachers do. This is all we do on page 2, because y'all think about this, okay? And you've either heard it or probably said it, because I can tell you I'm guilty in both of those places. Ready? We'll just differentiate. Right? Anybody ever heard that? Like, we'll just differentiate. Like, it's an easy thing to do. Like, right? Like, we get it. Like, you just said it and I get it. So here's what I tell people to do. We're going to eat this elephant one bite at a time. I am not going to tell you that standard deviations greater than 10 whole group instruction is not appropriate. I'm not going to say that, because you can still do whole group instruction. But here's what I'm going to challenge you to do. Okay, this is a challenge to classroom teachers to start thinking in that direction. Choose the goal area with the highest standard deviation, no matter what it is. So if you notice that in my class here, my highest standard deviation is a 13.1. That's not even that 14 or higher. It's a high standard deviation. It's not significantly high compared to what they say. But I'm going to take just the one with the highest standard deviation, which is literature. And I'm going to ask the teacher to challenge themselves to think about the goal area with the highest standard deviation, most academic diversity, where we're going to try to use small group differentiation. So now I've put it in my head, okay, when I do a literature piece, I'm going to need to group students, and I'm going to need to come up with a way to differentiate. By the way, I have a place I can go to find what they're ready for in those small groups, right? It's called the Learning Continuum. We have to learn that. We have to learn how to do that. But I'm just going to put it in my mind so that way I'm a little bit more aware. Does that make sense? That's a starting point for if I can start trying to think that through, I'm giving myself those baby steps. But look at the second question. Goal area where whole group instruction could be appropriate, which is the standard deviation less than 10. I want to make note of that too. I didn't happen to have any standard deviations less than 10. Okay, doesn't mean I can't do whole group. It just means that there's not a group where they're pretty much, not an area where they're all pretty much ready for the same thing. So it really starts that conversation to that, when is whole group appropriate, instruction appropriate? And that's been a conversation for a while, but that kind of helps that make sense. Now, here's what we do. We move on to page 3. Page 3 is the first time they've seen their individual students. So that's like how we met Nick and Tommy and Jordan. And so we see our individual students, and y'all teachers need time right here. I just always gave them time because they have to do this. Oh my gosh, would you look at Deborah and how she did on here? That is not at all like her. Or it's this way. Oh my gosh, look at Thomas. He scored at the top of this list. Because here's what I always tell teachers. Your kids are in order from the lowest RIT down to the highest RIT. The RIT is the number in bold within that range. There's a range, by the way, because there's a standard error, right? So that's why they give you a range. But their actual RIT is the number in bold. This is the student with the lowest RIT. So here's what I always ask teachers. Look at your very first student. That student is the student with the lowest RIT. Anybody surprised? Nobody's ever surprised. Okay. They will start going, well, yeah, but he has dyslexia. Or, well, yeah, but she's on an IEP for, which is great because that means that you know your kids, like you totally expected it because you know, you see. So go down to the bottom of the list and I go, okay, there's your student. Look at who your student is with the highest RIT. Anybody surprised? Again, we're not usually surprised, right? So here's the graphic organizer of what we do with this. We look at our student with the lowest RIT score. We go to our RIT chart, and this is y'all when the 10th grade teachers found out that they had students reading on the third, like a third grade, like they were ready for third grade. So then we go, okay, that's their RIT. What is that student scoring like? And it might be like they're ready for beginning of the year first grade reading, right? Depends on what subject we're in here. And then if we go to our highest student, and this one was what got high school teachers too, they're off the chart, which means they're ready for college level usually, or something like that, like depending on how far off the chart they are. So there could be a 10th grade teacher that's sitting there going, my lowest student is ready for the end of year third grade reading, and my highest student is ready for college level reading. And they're in the same class. And I'm like, right, aren't you glad you know that? Like that's pretty good information. Like we need to know that. But the next question is, how will you meet the needs of both instructionally? So here's what we've done. We put a name and a face to that situation on both ends. You know what we do as teachers? We pull some other kids right there around them and we go, okay, I'm gonna address this one right here. So what we're probably gonna do is when we pull Deborah, we're gonna pull Deborah with Edith and Mary. And we're really probably gonna get these 3 addressed at the same time. Does that make sense? And when we go to pull this Stephen, we're going to pair him with Sarah and Gerald, and we're really going to hit this end as well. So we start that conversation of how are we going to meet their needs instructionally, because we already know kids scoring below the 21st percentile and kids scoring above the 80th percentile don't need the same thing. So what are we going to do special for those 2 ends? And so that's where that kind of conversation comes in. Very helpful information. I love action plans. So there's always a question on how are we going to do this? And then we check back in. I would map it out in my calendar and I go, okay, in 3 weeks, I'm going to check, or 2 weeks, depending on what they're going to do. I want to check back in and how's it going instructionally on those 2 kids, right? What are we doing? What worked? What didn't work? And when we start talking, guess what? This third grade teacher is going to tell something that worked really well that this third grade teacher hadn't thought of. And we're going to share. Okay, so that was part 2. I would do it after the fall assessment. Now for part 3, let me show you this one. I would do part 3 after the winter assessment. This one includes my favorite report. It is so much my favorite report that we built assessment walls in my building by grade level based off of this report. We bought the pocket charts. Y'all know what I'm talking about. If it was a room full of secondary teachers, we'd all be like, the calculator pocket charts? But y'all are elementary and middle. You guys know what those pocket charts are? We built it. It's called the quadrant chart. That's where I would take teachers every year after the winter assessment. So we're going to go in and we're going to go to the quadrant chart. And I'm just going to show you some information here on this quadrant chart. Here's what you have. Down here across the bottom, this is achievement. This line right here, the y-axis, represents 50th percentile in achievement. That's the number off the RIT chart. This is how kids performed. So if I have students over here to the right of the y-axis, they are achieving higher than the norm. Do you hear that in the language? They're achieving higher than the norm. If I have students over here in the orange and the pink, they are achieving lower than the norm. It's not that they're above grade level or below grade level. It's just compared to the norm. Now, great thing that NWEA does is they do the same thing with growth. So this over here, these are growth percentiles. So they actually calculate and find 50th percentile for growth. So that's the norm growth. That's the average growth for a child like you at the same time that you took this test. So that's your average growth. So that's the x-axis. So kids that are above the x-axis are achieving more growth, or I don't want to use the word achieving again, but they have grown more than the norm, more than average. And students below the x-axis have grown less than the norm. Doesn't mean they haven't grown. They just have grown less than the norm. Does that make sense? Okay, green quadrant, high achievement, high growth. These kids are usually intrinsically motivated. Maybe mom and dad are holding the car keys hostage, whatever it takes. They're just usually intrinsically motivated, right? Like they have a reason to do really well and try their best all the time. But there are almost always at least one, if not two students in here that will surprise you. You'll go, how did Johnny end up in the green quadrant? And my response is always, I don't know, but go tell him how proud you are of him if you want him to end up there next time. Like he needs to know how proud you are that you recognize that he did really well. Now, this orange quadrant right here, I really don't have favorites, but I'm just going to tell you, this was my favorite time working with and celebrating these orange students. Low achievement, high growth. In my building, we celebrated growth. We had lots of growth incentives. We had growth incentives by teacher. We had growth incentives by grade level. We had growth incentives by building. We had all kinds of things. It was all free, okay, all free. But we had all these growth incentives and we were gonna have a growth party and we decided to celebrate all the kids that had more growth than the norm. When you go and you tell these students right here in the orange quadrant, this is my favorite thing, y'all, it gives me chills every time I talk about it. When you go and tell these students over here in the orange quadrant that they get to come to the class party, they look at you, or the growth party, they look at you like you are crazy and talking to the wrong person. Do you want to know why? Does anybody know why? They've never been invited to the party, right? We party based on achievement. They've never been invited to the party. That will encourage them to keep doing whatever it is they are doing. If they are achieving higher than the norm in growth, if their growth is higher than the norm, I need you to keep doing whatever you're doing because you're growing more than average. That's fabulous, right? That's how we're going to get those growth points on that accountability system. And that's how that child is going to eventually achieve. And they're going to be achieving higher than the norm. So we want to continue that behavior. Yellow students down here, high achievement, low growth. These kids need enrichment. This is your intervention. This is your enrichment group for your RTI right here. High achievement, low growth. If you want to move these quadrant axes, you can. Like if you go, I'm not going all the way down to 50th percentile for enrichment, I'm going to go to the 65th percentile. You can grab that y-axis with your mouse and pull it over and reset it, and it will reset. Okay, it'll change the colors. This right here, low achievement, low growth, that's your intervention group. That's the group that needs intervention right away. Now, here's the thing. Keep this in mind. Growth parties, if all you celebrate is growth, you're going to make all these mommies mad. Why are you going to make all these mommies mad? They've always been invited to the party. They're high achievers. And y'all, in mom's defense, here's what I'm going to tell you. It could be caused by the classroom instruction, right? So it could be the fault of the adult in the room, that these are high achievers that are not growing. Because what do we do when we get those high exceeding kids in our class? We're like, oh, good. We're still going to teach to the middle. So glad you already know how to do this. This is great, right? Like that's what some people do. So we've got to think about that. That might be a conversation, you know, hey, listen, or what are we doing different for them? Like what are we doing to make them grow? What are we doing to move them? Then the pink students over here, low achievement, low growth. It always happens that somebody will say, who are these kids? Who do you think these kids are? What's your first instinct of who those kids are? SPED. That always happens. And sometimes that's the case. And if your SPED students are right here, to me, that is also a conversation that has to happen, because your SPED students are receiving interventions every day, probably, if not small group, if not one-to-one, definitely small group, right? Like they're getting interventions. They have the most room for growth. So their growth, they should be going up at least, right? And if you're growing, you should be getting closer to achieving. So that could be a conversation to be had as well. We really want to watch where those SPED students are, because here's the conversation. If you have a SPED student that is down, like let's say this dot right here represents a SPED student. They're in the, I can't see, 15th percentile maybe, and maybe the, I don't know, 3rd or 4th percentile on growth. Whatever's happening in that SPED situation is not working. Right? Like that's what we know. Whatever has been happening is not working. They're not growing. They're not achieving. So we need to do something there. So I go through that and you can see everything just like in the last one. Everything is animated, shows you everything. The video is there of me doing this training. And by the way, you can come over here. Just yesterday, I got an email from a school district and they said, should we compare student growth to the whole, individual student growth to the whole class? Or should we compare their student growth to themselves? And, you know, my answers are always going to depend on, it depends on what you're looking for, right? But if you're looking about the accountability system, their student growth is based on their own historical performance. So you've got some things you might look at, but if you go to the bottom underneath the quadrant chart over here, it will tell you the amount of projected growth. It will tell you what was the amount of observed growth, and it will tell you yes or no, did that student meet their growth goal? So that's a way for you to keep track of where those students are in that process for accountability for that growth piece. And that's in that 3rd page. So here's what I have teachers do. I'm a firm believer in, I know this is crazy because some of our younger teachers are like, why am I writing this down with a pencil? Like I could be doing this on my computer. And I get it, but I just have this thought process that and it's probably just because it's the way that works for me. But if you write those kids' names down in the different categories, it's putting it somewhere else in your brain. Now, if you want it digitally, you can put those kids' names and you can type it in there differently, right? But we got to put them in categories ourselves. The report did it, but there's something about transferring that information from the report to our own document. I'm going to look at these students in the pink quadrant a little bit differently if I have to write all their names down here and really look at it and go, these are the kids that ended up in the pink quadrant. What are we going to do? They need interventions. This is a collaborative team time conversation that you put all your grade level teachers together and you start going, okay, who did you have in the pink quadrant? This is who I had in the pink quadrant. Which ones of yours are ready for this? And that's when we start pulling 2 of hers, 3 of mine, and 1 of yours, and they're going to come together. 6 of them are going to be in a intervention group, right? So we want to have that collaborative conversation here. Yellow quadrant, these are my enrichment kids. We're gonna do the same thing. I mean, I've got this one that's just knocking it out of the ballpark, but this is where they should be, I mean, they need this intervention, enrichment. She could say, oh, I've got one that needs the same thing. She could say, I've got one that needs the same thing. There's 3. I'm gonna pull them, one from each person's classroom. The orange quadrant, how are we gonna celebrate? It was simple, y'all. I mean, it was simple. I had a 4th grade teacher that was so surprised that one of her students ended up in the orange quadrant. She was like, I am pulling him out in the hallway tomorrow, and I am having a conversation with him about how proud I am. I cannot believe that he did. I'm going to tell him how proud I am. Changed the student, never to be the same, because his 4th grade teacher pulled him out in the hallway and told him how proud she was of him for the way he performed on that test. He's a low achieving student. A teacher recognized him, made him want to do completely different every day. So it's the celebrations can be very simple. When I was at the high school, y'all remember the Wii? When the Wii came out, we had a lot of poverty students. They'd heard about it and they knew some of the kids were playing with the Wii, but they'd never been able to touch one. They'd never seen one, they never touched one, they just heard about it. So we had Wii parties for growth where, we had other people bring their Wiis up to school and it didn't cost us anything, but we could celebrate and let you play on the Wii for a few minutes before, just so you could learn it and see it and experience it. And you would be surprised what kids will do. 10th grade classroom. Students had owls. They colored little paper owls. There was a paper mache tree on the wall. And I know we don't have any 10th grade teachers in here, but I'm just going to tell you, paper mache tree on the wall. Every student had their owl. Their owl got to go up the tree based on the amount of growth they had, not based on achievement. It was all about growth. That's all we focused on was growth. You got to move your owl. You want to know something about 10th grade boys? I've never been a 10th grade boy, but some people have been 10th grade boys. Do y'all know anything about 10th grade boys? They are very competitive, very competitive. So not only did they compete within their classroom, but first period competed with second period, competed with third period, competed with 4th period, right? Like they're super competitive. And guess what the girls did? The girls became really competitive too, right? Like we just all jumped in because that was just like some people get really excited about that and then everybody joins in. And so it doesn't take a lot, but growth incentive thoughts and to be intentional is really important because we all know you have some kids that do not take the test serious. That's a real thing, right? High school, it was tough. We had some kids that didn't take it serious. Elementary, it was tough. We had some kids that didn't take it serious. So we had to get creative on how do you get them to take it serious. Yes. Can I name some of the? No, they colored them so they knew which one was theirs based on how they colored them. But I think they did put initials. Do you remember? Seems like they put initials or something like that because it was all based on growth. So it didn't really matter, but everybody knew who everybody's was because they were it was serious. Like it was a serious competition. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But telling parents it's only based on growth, not their achievement level, that is something. But that also brings me to, I'm glad you asked that, because we built our assessment walls in the elementary school to look like this, and they were in a locked room that not even, the custodian didn't even have a key to, because it was our data wall, it was our data room. And so we had, and the reason we did that was because the cards that we put in our pocket charts, y'all, the cards had pictures of the children. Because I thought that was really important that when you walk up to that card and you have to move that card, we need to see their face. So Jostens will give you a CD of all your kids' pictures. I just printed off sheets of them and cut the little thumbnails off and we stuck them on the front of their card. On the back of their card was all their data. And then they put them where they were in this quadrant chart. And then the next time we took the test, they would go move them based on how they moved. Lesson learned, I told you I'm pretty transparent. Make sure you take a picture of it before you move it. I was like, oh, I wish I remembered what that looked like before we moved that. That was the mistake. So always take a picture of it before you move it. One of the schools that I work with did this training for a bunch of administrators. She went and did it in her building. She had her East Lab build her a big quadrant piece of paper. She gave every teacher a certain color sticker. And they did them by grade level. So if it's third grade, Miss Smith got green, Miss Jones got red, and Miss whoever got blue. and they only put initials and they had to put their dots on the quadrant chart. And then what that administrator did is she had East make them a whole new one, and they put the new quadrant chart over it, did the same thing after the winter, after the spring, and then she could slide them side by side and they could look at it. That was really powerful because you could see this is where they all were. Did they go up and to the right? Like you could see the trend. Did they go up and to the right? Because that's what they should do. They should grow and they should achieve more, right? So that was a really powerful one. And the other thing that I did, this is that sheet that I told you that you can get from that linking study document, that 26-page document. All I did is I pulled the chart out that I needed at the time. And this is actually a training that I did in that school district. After we did the quadrant chart and we identified kids, it was the winter assessment. So we went through and we did the predictions based on the linking study. You could now just run the class breakdown by projected proficiency, but that wasn't a thing at the time. So you could just run class breakdown report like what we started the day out with and just do it by projected proficiency. And you can look to see, because this is where the power is, are these the same kids? It can help you group them. It seems like all the students in your pink quadrant are going to be your native support students, but some of those kids in the pink quadrant are actually close. So you might not want to group a student that's going to be that's predicted to be close in the same group as the students that are in need of support. So it just helps you make some grouping decisions if you do a comparison right there. Okay, so that's that training there. Okay, all of these are available. You can get to every single one of them and all of the pieces and parts by going to apsrc.net at this place. So see here, video of me doing the training. There's the PowerPoint. There's the document that you want to use to have teachers fill out. Then over here, the video of me doing it, the PowerPoint, the document. We will soon have this training on here as well. We're recording today, so it'll actually be today's recording and then the PowerPoint that we are using. Okay. One last thing that I want to go over with you, another place on our website. So I'm going to take you back to apsrc.net. And it's our summer academy. Okay, we heard, so the co-director, Melody Morgan, she's amazing, y'all. She's fantastic. She heard a need. Somebody just happened to ask a question. I don't remember where it was, like back in January. And they were like, so what are y'all doing for learning loss this summer? Well, you guys remember what we were like in January? Like we were just surviving. Everybody in education was just surviving, right? Like we weren't thinking about what are we going to do about learning loss in the summer. Well, she heard that need and she took off on this huge run. And so she has developed a summer academy opportunity that all of you can take part in. And if you know what your model looks like or what's going on, you do have access to be able to use this. So I want to show you where you can find the information. And if you're not the administrator, you can take this back to your school and share it with them as well. So where you want to go now, this is in a different place because this is part of we provide the state resource for digital learning. So this is part of the Arkansas Ready for Digital Learning tab. So you want to go to the Arkansas Ready for Digital Learning tab. And when you scroll down, you might make a note, you want to go to recorded webinars. And it's the May 5th webinar, but it's the power. You can listen to it where she gives you all the information. It's her telling you all about the Summer Academy, but you can also pull up the PowerPoint. So here's what is available and is an option. Okay, so program highlights. It is an integrated model design. I'm going to give you some options that you have. We have some key program features. It is a summer program with outcomes and incentives. We've got the timeline, we've got academic coaching model and resources and next steps. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So the integrated model, it's a student-focused model. But we will train the adults that are going to be engaged in the Summer Academy. Okay, we will handle that. We will engage, we will train the adults on the curriculum, the content, which is all digital, and the LMS, which y'all know from these past however many months we've been in all this. Once we've learned an LMS, you can pretty much go to any LMS, right? LMSs are all very similar once we've learned how to use an LMS. It's that initial process, but that's that building, the growing the capacity of the adult educators. We're going to do some training in an LMS and on some digital content, but you do have the option to do a hybrid delivery. It is hybrid because it is asynchronous work. Kids will work asynchronously, virtually, but they will also check in and work synchronously with an academic coach. If you go to the program, if you go into our summer program, you're going to go in for literacy and math. You go for both. And you only have to qualify for one or the other, but you go for both. Okay. So you're going to work, you can work asynchronously, but you're also going to meet with a coach synchronously. We do know that some schools want to bring kids on site this summer to feed them, right? Like that's what we do as educators. Like we're always worried about how our kids are eating in the summertime. Like you don't even sleep at night, right? So we do know that we have a lot of schools that are bringing kids on campus back to face so that they can feed them. And because they're trying to address the learning loss. You can do that in your model. You can work, kids can work online in a face-to-face setting. So we can work with you. I'm telling y'all, Mel is amazing. If you tell her what your model looks like and that you are interested in using this content, she can kind of help you think that through and work it out to where it will work, okay? It is a digital gap curriculum. So the word gap is really important. It's not like if you have a student that's going into the 4th grade, they've come out of 3rd grade and you put them in the summer academy, they're not getting a full year of 3rd grade. They're getting the gap curriculum. And we based the gap on the essential curriculum identified in the DESE Playbook. So it's a gap. So it can't be used for a full year content, but it is 25 days, 25 days worth of lessons. So it's built on a 5-week design and it's open to K through 8. So we're going to have those essential learning targets. It's going to be data driven. We're going to be using the MAP reading fluency assessment in the summer academy. So that's another thing that the adults will be trained in. But I want to get here to this timely interventions. Oh, you can even use the curriculum. It'll be available in the fall. That if you're not doing a summer school program and you're like, hey, I want to address this in my building in the fall, this is content that is provided by the state and an LMS that's provided by the state. You can get that gap curriculum and you can use that in your interventions or your learning loss program when school starts in the fall. You can have access to it. It is a replicable model. But here's the deal. If you give us 50 students, if you can identify 50 students in any grades, K through 8, like maybe you have 5 in kindergarten, 6 in 1st grade, if you can get up to 50, you have to give us an adult. If you give us an adult, look what your adult's going to make. $5,000 for 5 weeks. And on top of that, there's performance pay. We're going to compare their spring data to their fall data. And if the group grows, if there's growth, you can get an additional $1,500 stipend. So it has the potential to pay $6,500 for 5 weeks of teaching. Now, we know no summer other than this one, is it harder to get someone to want to do summer school? Like we've had a hard year and everybody wants a break. But that may be an incentive enough in itself. You never know. So kind of think about that. They will get professional development training. They have training sessions. They have to be here, and we will be learning to access the reading fluency assessment tools. So those are some of the things for the coach. This goes into it a little bit more. These are all things that we will provide to the coach. So this is that building the capacity of your adult educators. These are things we're going to be talking about, and we're going to be including some science of reading strategies within that. Timelines and commitments. Our summer academy does not start till July 5th. So the thought process here is, first of all, kids need a break. We all know kids need a break. The other thought process is, you know that thing called a summer slide? It happens because there's a break and then we start school. So we're moving it closer to the school starts, which July 5th through August 6th. That's when ours is. But if you want to use the curriculum for your own and do it on your own, that's a possibility. So don't be afraid to think outside of the box. If you need access to the gap curriculum, we can work with you and work that out. If you don't want to do the summer academy. Yes, ma'am. School district. It is, I think, yeah, it's right there. $200 per student tuition cost, because we have to pay the coach. The content's free and the LMS is free. So it's just paying that coach.
This
Yes.
does qualify.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. So it's, there are some things that we have to get, some agreements and that kind of thing, which is just saying that, you know, that you'll give us your data in the spring and you'll give us your data in the fall, those kind of things. So I'm going to show you, you know how to get to this PowerPoint. I showed you how to get to it. Recorded webinars, May 5th. Resources is another link. When it's underlined, if you go to resources, this is going to give you even more information. So this is all about the compensation schedule to the academic coach. This is coming. It is in the hands of our attorneys here in the office, and they're working on the agreement and getting that ready. So that's coming. Here's the district participation form. District MOU. Here's an example of the GAP curriculum. I want to show you this. This is first grade math. This is how we built it. We use the Lincoln Learning and we use the Buzz LMS, but it's all designed around, where's my plus sign to make that big? Oh, down here. It's all designed around those essential learning targets, right? When you see the word GAP, then that was a standard that was identified as that GAP curriculum. If not, then those are standards that just tied into those lessons. So you can see this is day one, and these are the things that are available. We will teach the coach how you can hide certain things or make some decisions on which ones you want students to do based on how they're doing in the classroom. So we'll do the training on the curriculum. All kinds of other things in here, student identification guidelines. So you can identify which students qualify for the summer GAP program, summer academy pathways. So this is a great opportunity, y'all. If you just think that you want any piece of it, or if you want to participate or anything, Melody Morgan. It's M Morgan at apsrc.net. She's phenomenal. I promise you she'll help you think through how you can get the best out of this. She's all about whatever she needs to do to help kids. Okay. So that's really it on this, on the things that I had today. I am Jeana with a J. So if you need me for anything, I'm J Williams at apsrc.net. But know this, y'all, we can help you with training. We can help you with school support services. We have lots of options. So please, if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out either to me or to Melody, either one. And if we're not the right person for the question you have, we'll get you to the right person. Okay, so don't hesitate. She's M Morgan at apsrc.net and I'm J Williams at apsrc.net. So I hope that this was helpful. The learning loss piece is all about the easiest way to go in and quickly identify those kids, because we're running out of time, right? Like we're here, we're running out of time. We need to quickly go and identify them. We need to figure out what to do. We can use that learning curriculum. The other thing you can do, you can use our summer GAP curriculum. It's based on the essentials. So, and it will be available for you in the fall if you want to use it in the fall. You just have to participate in the Arkansas Ready for Digital Learning, which is free. So you have lots and lots of options. So I hope I've given you enough things to think about today on how you can address that learning loss and where you can go in and get that information. And if you have any questions, just let me know.